chapter 26, verses 20 through 30, and can be found on page 808 of your pew Bibles. When it was evening, he took his place with the 12, and while they were eating, he said, "Truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me." And they became greatly distressed and began to say to him after one another, "Surely not I, Lord." He answered, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that one not to have been born." Judas, who betrayed him, said, "Surely not I, Rabbi." He replied, "You have said so." While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to the disciples, and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will never again drink of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." When they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And this is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated. I'm going to invite forward Reverend Fletcher, Harper, Executive Director at Green Faith. Thank you for all the good work you've done with us with the Green Circle and how you lead us in considering creation as part of the mission of God in our world that we are learning sometimes lately, but we are learning.
Thank you. Thank you. Would you say a prayer with me this morning? Lord God, we give you thanks for this remarkable gift of life on this planet. We don't realize it now, God, but we're traveling through space, spinning at about 15,000 miles an hour. And out of the mystery and depth of your providential care, in the midst of that, we enjoy our lives. So we say thank you, and we ask you to teach us how to do right by that gift in Jesus' name. Amen. Good morning. Good morning. It's good to be here. It's just, Todd sort of stole my opening line. I was going to give the band a sort of one-man ovation here, but you guys are awesome. I mean, I think it's just absolutely fantastic to have music like that to enrich the worship that we get to share together. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And as Todd said, I'm the director of Green Faith, which is an interfaith environmental organization. And I'm going to tell you our mission. Our mission, it starts out, it says, "Because the earth and all people are sacred and at risk, Green Faith is building a worldwide multi-faith movement to protect this planet and all its inhabitants. Our members work together to transform their own lives, their spiritual institutions, and society, to protect the planet and to create a loving, compassionate, and just world." That's our mission. But I'm going to start with you one step before that mission. Because I'm going to start with you by talking about why the earth is important to us in our walk with Christ. Now, over the years, I'm a pastor. I was a parish priest for 10 years before getting started with Green Faith. I know a little bit about what it is like to help people walk towards God, to walk into that love, to walk into that embrace. About 18 years ago, we started a practice at Green Faith where we would ask people to just sit in silence for 1 minute and to see if they could recall a spiritual experience that they had had out of doors. People would sit, and we'd ask them to share their experiences and to describe them. And people were a little bit hesitant at first because people are a little shy around those things. But when they started to talk, something remarkable started to happen. I have a daughter and she's 15 years old now, but when she was little and when she took baths, she loved to use those little sponges that were the shape of compressed animals, and you drop them in the water and they sort of fill out into the proper shape of the animal. Watching people tell these stories about their outdoor spiritual experiences was like watching that process of those sponges take on their proper form. When people started to talk about these experiences, you could watch the sap rise. You could see life come into them. You could see them fill out their proper stature. You could see the healing. You could see them start to inflect their words with an uncommon kind of care and move their hands and their fingers in a very particular kind of way because they were trying with every fiber in their body to tell you that what they had experienced outdoors had saved them. I went on and did more and more research about this and found that around the world, regardless of race or ethnicity or religion or social or economic class, that when asked, somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of all people on the planet say that their most powerful spiritual experience happened outdoors. And yet, you all are an exception to this, but yet religious institutions and communities around the world have been incredibly slow to give voice to that, to honor those stories, to affirm those experiences. People are afraid. There are two ways you can talk about being close to nature in our culture and not be considered weird. One is with our pets, right? We're totally down with everybody loving their pets. Not a problem whatsoever. Second place, gardens. People are usually okay with people talking about how much they love their gardens. You get beyond that, and very quickly this subtle kind of fear starts to emerge that if you love nature too much, you're walking a little close to that line that divides the sane from the insane, and people sort of start to back away. First question I want to ask you, what's this about? What is it for us to be ashamed of one of the major ways in which God wants to love us? Why can't we live into those stories a little bit more? Why can't we celebrate them, welcome them, allow them to change us? Thousands of miles from here, on the outskirts of the capital of Mogadishu, about 2 years ago, a woman named Amina Mousse was concerned because she was a small farmer, and like millions of other people in her country and across Africa and Asia and Latin America, she was having a hard time continuing to make a living. She was a subsistence farmer. She survived on the vegetables that she grew and the very small number of animals that she was able to graze, and she had a hard time making a living because there were droughts that were just relentless, over and over and over again, not enough rain. Only a few of us remember and can know what that kind of anxiety is like, where the very source of your life is literally dying in front of you. She got on her cell phone, because God bless cell phones, everybody on the planet has one at this point. She got on her cell phone, called up a friend who'd been through a similar kind of thing and who'd left her farm and moved into Mogadishu as a displaced person. She couldn't live anymore on the farm. She said, "What's it like?" Well, it's not easy. It's not easy. Every once in a while I can find an odd job and get paid a little bit. I had to beg. I barely make it. But I didn't feel like I had a choice. Amina hung up, she thought. A couple of weeks later, she took all of her meager remaining possessions. She moved into Mogadishu. 6 months later, she was living in a refugee settlement outside of, just on the outskirts of Mogadishu. And as more and more of these refugees move into these areas, of course, the demand for land increases. And when the demand for land increases, its value increases. And so people want to get hold of it and develop it. So in the week between Christmas and New Year last year, this settlement, 5,000 or so people woke up one morning and they saw a phalanx of bulldozers that with no warning sort of blew their horns and started moving and bulldozing the ramshackle shacks and sheds that these people, including Amina, had been living in. Because they wanted to, people had bought the land, wanted to take it over. A local human rights group had urged the developers to at least give folks 12 hours, 6 hours notice so they could get their possessions together. They didn't even do that. And Amina has not been heard from since. This is a story about what the world looks like as it gets hotter and hotter and hotter because of climate change. More droughts, more severe storms, more innocent people, hardworking people displaced from their homes, losing their savings, becoming impoverished, not because they have any lack of desire to work and support their families, because the climate's changing at a rate that they just simply can't manage. And this is going to be happening more and more and more. And this is a sober sermon, you know. Some sermons are joyful. This is a sober sermon. Now, this is something that as Christians we've got to reckon with. We have to reckon with what are the causes and what do we need to do. Now, some of the cause is at the level of ourselves and our own lives. And I'm going to say something about that in a little bit. Some of it is because of our institutions. Some of it is systemic. It's politics, it's economics, it's big stuff. There's a lot of power at that systemic level. And the reason that I chose the slightly odd scripture reading for today, which talks about betrayal and then is the story of the Last Supper, is because part of what we have to reckon with is at this stage is a betrayal of public trust by many leaders in our world, many institutions of leadership in our world, which have not wanted to reckon with this painful, challenging reality that requires us to make changes. I'm going to read you a statement now. There is unanimous agreement in the scientific community that a temperature increase of 1.5 degrees centigrade would bring about significant changes in the Earth's climate, including rainfall distribution, other environmental alterations. With the timescales involved, it would be tempting for society to wait before doing anything. The potential implications for the world are, however, so large that policy options need to be considered much earlier. It could be too late to take effective countermeasures to reduce the effects or even stabilize the situation. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is, guess who wrote that? That was written, there were two combined statements in there, written by senior researchers at ExxonMobil and at Shell Oil. Okay, now the second question is, when did they write it? Didn't write it in the 2010s. Didn't write it in the 2000s. Didn't write it in the 1990s. It was written in the 1980s. And so there is this unavoidable, very painful breach of trust that is something that we need to reckon with. Now I tell you, the environment is a lot of things. One thing the environment is thank God, it is immune to human spin. Not immune to human sin, it's immune to human spin. So we can say that we're doing all these good things for the environment. The ad budget of the fossil fuel companies at this point is devoted almost entirely to saying how much they're doing in renewable energy and biofuels and all this sort of thing, which is unfortunately not true. We can say that as much as we want. But the earth only has ears to hear and eyes to see what we actually do, which is consistent in the way that God makes us as people too. When we have our kids, we look at what they do. I have a 23-year-old and a 15-year-old. I've been through my share of explanations, right? As have many of you. This is how God makes reality. The truth matters. And so we are at this stage now where we've got to reckon with this kind of challenging reality that major powers in the world do not want us to recognize what is going on. That will become harder and harder to hide, but there's a decision, and it is a moral decision, that each of us needs to make about how we reckon with that reality. That reckoning then has an impact on how we live our lives. I love the concentric circles that you had at the beginning of the worship service describing the vision and the reality of how it is that people can walk into a deeper relationship with Jesus Christ in this church. And it's a beautiful progression about meeting people where they are and building bridges from one step to the next, closer and closer and deeper into that depth of love, which makes us who we're really meant to be. The same kind of progression is something that we need to engage with our relationship with the earth. Because we need to ask ourselves seriously, when we say the word creation, do we really mean it? Again, I have kids, my refrigerator door has been plastered for over 20 years now with some of the absolutely most questionable looking artwork in the world. You get what I'm saying? I put that artwork there because either my son or my daughter produced it. I don't care what it looks like to anybody else. To me, it looks beautiful. That's how God feels about the earth. That's why in the book of Genesis, at the end of the process of creation, God looked out over everything. I mean, in the Hebrew it says it was very good. Today it would have been awesome. That's how God feels about the earth. And so we're called to walk 3 pathways to righteous power and impact in terms of our own individual lives, how our institutions work, and how our society works. At an individual level, it's becoming mindful about how we travel around, less car travel, less plane travel. This is not easy. I mean, a lot of people, because I'm the environmental minister, a lot of people give me the Kermit the Frog thing, it's easy, green. It is not easy. I'm here to tell you, it is a challenge. It is a challenge. Don't kid yourself. I mean, there are some things that are easy, sure. Big stuff is hard. We need to deal with this as adults who have to deal with hard things sometimes, challenging things. In our own lifestyle, it's how we travel around. It's making sure that we eat more food that is grown locally, reducing our meat consumption if we consume meat, having a strong preference for local and humanely raised meat of different kinds, powering our homes with 100% renewable energy. With our institutions, it's sort of taking those individual behaviors and baking them into the DNA of how our institutions work. Todd has been trying for years to figure out how this church could go solar. And it's hard because right now the way the roof is aligned and stuff, it's not workable. But he's been trying for years. The great saying about part of what a Christian life looks like is long faithfulness in the same direction. He's had that. And so we talked this morning about some ways that you can purchase alternative energy supplies from communities to empower communities that have absolutely no access to electricity. And by doing that, kids can study at night, people can get vaccinated, women have cleaner cooking facilities, productive enterprises, businesses can get started. It's a little bit less than a little bit less than 1 billion people on the planet who live without access to modern forms of electricity. And we need to get them electrified. And it needs to be 100% solar and wind and renewable sources. Because if it's not, we're facing a horrible, horrible future. And then on an institutional level, on a systemic level, and This is like, you don't go to dinner and talk about religion and politics, I'm sort of breaking every single law in the books, But we need governmental systems and laws that require people to protect the earth in a way that is consistent with science. Because not to do so is to pass on to the lovely children that we saw here earlier an earth that in many places is literally uninhabitable. It's a question of love. And we have the solutions at hand. I think for me as a person who's given a lot of my life to this, this is the thing that's most frustrating, is that the solutions are there. And there is this very, very dangerous tendency not to deal with the reality of what is happening and to pretend that it's just a hoax. That has to stop. And Christians and other people of faith have to help stop it. So I'm here today to thank you all for the work that you have done in this regard over the last 5 years. Last year, Todd and his colleagues organized a really powerful multi-faith day of learning and of commitment around this. And out of that, the Green Faith Circle that you all are engaged in got started. And I was saying to Todd that we're doubling down ourselves on our commitment to building local discipleship around what this looks like. Because this individual and institutional and systemic, we need all of it. It all is mutually supportive. It's the way that the world becomes new. And we're moving towards a vision where, I want to read you this, we were working with a church the other day that was having this as a mission statement. We envision a world transformed